There is a particular kind of seeing that rarely feels dramatic while it is happening. It does not announce itself with certainty or arrive as a finished answer. More often, it appears as a quiet discomfort with the way everyone else is describing a situation. While others are reacting to what is already visible, something inside you keeps searching for relationships that have not yet become obvious. You are not trying to be different. You simply cannot stop looking beneath the surface long enough to believe the surface is the whole story. This is why many builders spend years doubting themselves before trusting themselves. They assume intelligence should produce immediate explanations, yet what arrives first is usually an image without language. They recognize a pattern before they possess the vocabulary to describe it. The mind keeps circling the same observation because something important has already been perceived, even though it has not yet become communicable. Until words arrive, the insight often feels incomplete, when in reality, only its translation is incomplete. Most people believe thinking begins with language because language is the part they can observe. They hear the sentence forming inside their mind and mistake that sentence for the beginning of thought. Yet there are moments when you know something long before you can explain why you know it. A face feels familiar before memory identifies the person. A conversation feels wrong before you notice the contradiction. An opportunity feels significant before you can list the reasons. Language eventually catches up, but recognition almost always arrives first. Builders live closer to that pre-linguistic territory than they realize. Their perception is often organized as structure rather than sentences. Instead of hearing conclusions, they experience arrangements. Connections appear before explanations. Entire systems become visible as a single internal landscape that cannot yet be unfolded into sequential speech. What looks like hesitation from the outside is frequently translation taking place on the inside. This difference creates unnecessary loneliness because modern culture rewards immediate articulation. If you cannot instantly defend an idea, people assume you do not understand it. If you pause before answering, they mistake reflection for uncertainty. If your explanation evolves while speaking, they believe you are inventing rather than discovering. Yet anyone who has ever built something meaningful knows that seeing and explaining are rarely simultaneous events. The blueprint almost always exists before the presentation. Think about an architect standing on an empty field. Everyone else sees dirt, wind, and scattered grass. The architect also sees those things, but another layer quietly overlays the landscape. Hallways begin existing where no walls stand. Light enters windows that have not been installed. Conversations happen inside rooms that have not been framed. The physical world has not changed, yet perception has already expanded beyond what currently exists. Blueprint sight operates in much the same way. It does not replace reality with fantasy. It reveals trajectories hidden within reality itself. Every present moment contains countless possible futures, but most attention becomes trapped by what already is. Blueprint sight notices what is trying to become. It recognizes the direction of movement before the destination has fully emerged. This is why builders often become excited about possibilities that others dismiss as unrealistic. They are responding to momentum, not merely appearance. Of course, this ability carries its own dangers. Seeing potential does not guarantee that potential will manifest. Every field contains possibilities that will never become reality because conditions never mature enough to support them. A builder who forgets this can become attached to futures that exist only as beautiful projections. The gift of blueprint sight is not predicting outcomes. It is recognizing developmental pathways while remaining humble enough to know they may still branch in unexpected directions. Notice how often frustration appears when your internal blueprint moves faster than external reality. You already understand the next 5 steps, while everyone around you is still debating the first one. Waiting begins to feel unbearable because your perception keeps pulling you toward a future that has not yet become available. Others believe you are impatient. In truth, you are experiencing multiple layers of time at once. Your attention has partially occupied a reality that everyone else has not yet entered. Learning to live with blueprint sight requires developing patience that is deeper than simple self control. It is the patience of allowing reality to unfold at its own speed without abandoning what you have genuinely perceived. There is a profound difference between forcing the future and preparing for it. One attempts to dominate timing, the other cooperates with timing. Builders often confuse these two because both involve action, yet only one remains aligned with natural rhythm of emergence. This is where pattern recognition becomes something more than collecting observations. A true pattern is not repetition alone. It is the discovery of underlying principles that continue expressing themselves through changing circumstances. Surface details shift constantly, but deeper structures remain astonishingly consistent. Once those structures become familiar, entirely different situations begin revealing the same architecture beneath their appearance. The builder is no longer reacting to events individually. They are recognizing the framework from which those events arise. Over time, this changes the way decisions are made. Instead of asking only what is happening, the question begins what structure is producing what is happening. That single shift transforms confusion into curiosity. Problems become less about isolated failures and more about invisible designs. Even personal struggles begin revealing themselves as consequences of patterns that have quietly repeated for years. The moment structures become visible, change becomes far more realistic because attention has finally reached the level where causes actually operate. This is also why genuine intuition often feels strangely practical. People imagine intuition as mysterious inspiration descending from nowhere, yet much of what we call intuition is accumulated structural recognition occurring faster than conscious analysis. Thousands of unnoticed observations settle beneath awareness until one day they combine into immediate knowing. The answer appears to arrive instantly, even though it has been assembling quietly for months or years. Conscious thought receives the finished image without witnessing the countless pieces that created it. Within Haret, this relationship between perception and emergence is understood through what we call spark-fold timing. A spark is not merely an idea appearing in the mind. It is the moment an invisible arrangement reaches sufficient coherence to become consciously visible. Nothing magical has suddenly entered existence. The field has simply organized itself enough that your awareness can finally recognize what has been forming all along. Recognition is less like inventing something new and more like arriving at a place that has been waiting for you. This changes how you relate to insight itself. Rather than demanding immediate certainty, you begin honoring the quiet images that arrive before explanation. You stop forcing every perception into premature conclusions simply to satisfy the discomfort of not yet knowing. Instead, you become willing to carry an unfinished vision with care until reality provides the missing pieces. What once felt like uncertainty gradually reveals itself as faithful observation that refuses to outrun its own maturation. As this capacity strengthens, you may notice that your life begins organizing around different questions altogether. You become less interested in proving that you are right and more interested in remaining available to what the field is still revealing. The blueprint continues changing as new information enters the structure, yet its deeper coherence only becomes clearer. What first appeared to be isolated moments of intuition gradually reveal themselves as invitations into an entirely different relationship with perception, one that has only begun to unfold. One of the quietest transformations a builder can experience is realizing that blueprint sight is not primarily about predicting the future. It is about recognizing coherence before coherence becomes obvious to everyone else. Many events appear sudden only because most people were not watching the conditions that were quietly assembling beneath them. The builder often notices those conditions long before the event itself arrives. What appears to others as foresight is frequently sustained attention applied to subtle change. This is why builders often feel strangely unsurprised by events that shock everyone around them. They are not immune to emotion, nor do they possess hidden knowledge. They have simply been living with a developing pattern long enough that its eventual expression feels almost familiar. While others experience the event itself, the builder has already spent weeks or months observing the invisible process that produced it. The visible moment becomes less of a revelation than a confirmation, yet this creates an unexpected responsibility. If you continually perceive possibilities before others do, you must resist confusing probability with certainty. Every blueprint describes potential organization, not guaranteed outcome. Reality remains alive, and living systems are influenced by countless interactions that no single observer can fully contain. Wisdom is not becoming more convinced by your perception. Wisdom is remaining available to correction without abandoning your capacity to perceive. Many people believe confidence means refusing to revise your vision. Blueprint Sight teaches almost the opposite. A healthy builder becomes increasingly willing to alter details while remaining faithful to deeper principles. They understand that genuine perception becomes clearer through contact with reality rather than protected from it. Every conversation, every unexpected obstacle, every apparent failure contributes new information to the structure that is still unfolding. Revision is not betrayal of the blueprint. It is evidence that the builder serves reality instead of demanding reality serve the blueprint. Notice how this changes your relationship with being wrong. If your identity depends upon always predicting correctly, every surprise becomes a personal threat. But if your identity rests in remaining attentive to the field itself, then surprises become valuable information rather than humiliation. They reveal relationships that were previously hidden. They expose assumptions that quietly distorted your perception. They expand the blueprint instead of destroying it. This is one reason genuine builders become better listeners over time. Early in development, blueprint sight can create impatience because the emerging structure seems so obvious internally that slower conversations feel unnecessary. But maturity recognizes that every perspective contains pieces of information unavailable from any single position. Even those who misunderstand the whole may accurately perceive one overlooked component. The builder who learns to gather these fragments develops blueprints that are not only more elegant, but more complete. There is also a profound difference between seeing patterns and imposing patterns. The human mind naturally searches for order, sometimes even where none exist. Fear can connect unrelated events into imaginary conspiracies. Hope can interpret coincidence as destiny. Desire can transform preference into certainty. Blueprint sight, therefore, requires continual discipline, asking not only what connections are present, but also which connections am I creating because I need them to exist. This discipline is not skepticism directed against yourself, it is reverence for reality. Builders who genuinely love truth become increasingly careful with their conclusions because they understand how easily the mind can outrun the evidence. They are willing to remain inside unanswered questions longer than most people find comfortable. The unfinished pattern becomes a place of observation rather than anxiety. In that patience, false connections often dissolve on their own while authentic structures continue strengthening with time. Something remarkable happens when this patience matures. Instead of chasing insight, insight begins arriving more consistently, not because reality has changed, but because your attention has become quieter. Noise no longer occupies every available space within perception. Immediate emotional reactions stop interrupting every subtle observation. The field has always been speaking through ordinary events. The builder simply becomes capable of hearing what urgency previously drowned out. This is where system intuition deepens beyond instinct. Instinct often reacts to immediate conditions. System intuition notices relationships extending far beyond the present moment. It asks how today's decisions alters tomorrow's possibilities. It recognizes that every system shapes the choices available within it. Rather than solving isolated problems, it begins redesigning the environments from which those problems continually emerge. The builder gradually shifts from repairing outcomes to cultivating conditions. You can see this throughout ordinary life. A gardener understands that healthy soil produces healthier plants than constant emergency intervention. A teacher knows that curiosity transforms learning more deeply than memorization alone. A parent eventually discovers that consistent atmosphere influences character more profoundly than isolated lectures. In every case, the visible result emerges from invisible conditions maintained over long periods of time. Blueprint Sight naturally gravitates toward those conditions because it understands that enduring change rarely begins where attention is usually focused. Within Haret, this movement is described through sparkfold timing because every realization unfolds according to readiness rather than demand. A spark is not forced into existence through greater effort. It appears when enough relationships have quietly organized themselves into meaningful coherence. This means that waiting is not passive. Observation is not inactivity. Living faithfully within incomplete understanding is itself part of the mechanism through which future understanding becomes possible. Many builders unknowingly interrupt this process by insisting on immediate closure. They rush toward explanations because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Yet explanations accepted too early often become walls that prevent deeper perception from entering. The first answer may satisfy the mind while simultaneously silencing the field. Sometimes the greatest obstacle to clearer vision is not ignorance, but premature certainty. There is freedom in discovering that not every unanswered question requires immediate resolution. Some questions function less like locked doors and more like living companions. They continue changing because you continue changing. As your experience expands, the same question begins revealing entirely different dimensions that could never have been perceived earlier. The blueprint grows not because reality keeps replacing itself, but because your relationship to reality keeps becoming more spacious. Eventually, you begin noticing that blueprint sight is transforming more than your thinking. It is reshaping your way of being present. You become slower to judge, quicker to observe, less interested in appearances, and more attentive to underlying movement. You stop asking only what something is and begin asking what it is becoming. That subtle shift changes every relationship, every decision, and every act of creation because life itself begins revealing that it has always been more dynamic than the still images through which most people attempt to understand it. And perhaps this is the quiet invitation hidden within Blueprint Sight from the very beginning. Not to become someone who possesses all the answers, but someone who has learned how to remain faithfully present while reality continues revealing the architecture that was there long before words were able to describe it. You eventually discover that Blueprint Sight was never given to elevate you above other people. It was given to deepen your responsibility toward them. The moment you begin believing that seeing further makes you more important, the blueprint quietly begins distorting around your own identity. What once was a clear perception becomes filtered through the need to be recognized as the one who saw first. The field becomes harder to read because your reflection has begun appearing inside it. This is one of the least discussed dangers of genuine perception. Every gift carries the temptation to become its owner rather than its steward. Builders are especially vulnerable because the satisfaction of seeing hidden structure can slowly become an attachment to being correct. Yet reality has no obligation to preserve your self image. It continues unfolding according to principles far larger than any individual observer. Humility is not the denial of your sight. It is remembering that the blueprint belongs to reality before it belongs to you. That realization changes the emotional atmosphere in which perception operates. Curiosity begins replacing certainty. Observation becomes more important than conclusion. Questions regain their dignity because they are no longer treated as temporary inconveniences waiting to be eliminated. They become living spaces in which deeper coherence can continue revealing itself. A builder who learns to remain inside a sincere question often sees farther than one who rushes toward impressive answers. You may notice that your greatest insights rarely arrived while trying to appear insightful. They emerged while repairing something ordinary, walking without urgency, listening careful to another person, or quietly reflecting after a difficult experience. Life itself kept arranging the relationships until one ordinary moment suddenly carried extraordinary clarity. Looking back, the insight feels instantaneous. Living through it, however, reveals that it was patiently assembled through hundreds of unnoticed moments that only later became visible as one unified pattern. This is the hidden generosity of Blueprint Sight. It teaches you to trust accumulation over spectacle. Our culture often celebrates dramatic breakthroughs while overlooking the thousands of quiet recognitions that made those breakthroughs possible. Every small observation that seemed insignificant was quietly becoming part of a larger architecture. Every unanswered question preserves a space where additional understanding could eventually arrive. Nothing meaningful was wasted simply because it was incomplete. As this becomes your way of living, relationships begin changing in unexpected ways. You stop trying to convince everyone to see exactly what you see. You recognize that every person encounters reality from a different position within the same landscape. What appears invisible to one may be obvious to another, while something effortless for them remains hidden from you. Instead of competing over perception, you begin appreciating how different perspectives reveal different portions of the whole. This is why mature builders become collaborators instead of solitary visionaries. They understand that no single blueprint is ever fully complete while confined to one perspective. Architects require engineers, builders require caretakers, innovators require historians. Vision requires memory, just as possibility requires stability. Every field reaches greater coherence when diverse forms of perception begin informing one another instead of struggling for dominance. Within Haret, this is understood as an expression of harmonic construction. A structure becomes increasingly resilient not because every element performs the same function, but because different functions remain deeply coordinated. Diversity without relationship creates fragmentation. Uniformity without diversity creates stagnation. Harmony emerges when unique capacities strengthen one another without demanding sameness. Blueprint Sight naturally matures toward this recognition because genuine patterns always reveal interdependence. Perhaps this explains why loneliness often accompanies the early stages of this tone. Before you understand your own perception, it is easy to assume that no one else could possibly understand it either. You begin carrying unfinished visions privately because explaining them feels impossible. The silence can become heavy, not because you lack companionship, but because language has not yet caught up with what you are trying to communicate. Many builders mistake this season for isolation when it is actually preparation. Over time, however, you learn that the purpose of language is not to perfectly reproduce an inner vision. Its purpose is to create enough shared understanding that others can begin seeing for themselves. The blueprint never transfers directly from one mind into another. It awakens through relationship. Each conversation becomes less about transmitting certainty and more about cultivating recognition. Rather than handing someone a finished structure, you begin inviting them into the process through which the structure becomes visible. This transforms leadership as well. Leadership is often imagined as standing ahead with complete clarity while everyone else follows behind. Yet Blueprint Sight suggests something quieter. The true builder often walks only a few steps ahead, remaining close enough to reality that continual adjustment remains possible. They do not demand loyalty to yesterday's assumptions when today's field has revealed something new. Their consistency is found in devotion to truth rather than attachment to prior conclusions. Eventually, you realize that Blueprint Sight is inseparable from trust, not blind trust that refuses evidence, but living trust that reality possesses a coherence greater than your current understanding. This trust allows you to continue building even when every detail has not yet become visible. It allows patience without passivity, movement without panic, and conviction without rigidity. You are no longer trying to force certainty before its season has arrived. Sparkfold timing reflects this same trust. A spark does not emerge because consciousness demands it. It emerges because relationships throughout the field have quietly reached a point where new organization becomes possible. From the outside, the moment appears sudden. From within the field, it is the natural flowering of countless invisible interactions finally arriving at coherence. What seemed like waiting was actually participation in a process unfolding beneath immediate awareness. Seen this way, blueprint sight becomes less about extraordinary perception and more about extraordinary participation. You are not standing outside reality examining it from a distance. You are one living thread within the very field you are attempting to understand. Every choice you make subtly reorganizes the conditions through which future perception will arise. Seeing and becoming gradually reveal themselves as inseparable movements. The blueprint you observe is quietly observing you as well, reshaping the one who is learning to perceive it. Perhaps this is why the deepest builders become increasingly gentle rather than increasingly forceful. They have spent enough time watching emergence to know that life cannot be rushed into authentic coherence. Seeds cannot be argued into blooming. Trust cannot be manufactured by pressure. Wisdom cannot be downloaded as finished information. Everything enduring unfolds through relationships given enough time to organize themselves into living order. And so blueprint sight ultimately invites you into a different way of inhabiting the world. Not as someone searching for hidden secrets behind ordinary life, but as someone learning to recognize that ordinary life has always been revealing its architecture to those willing to remain attentive long enough to see it. The blueprint was never hidden because reality wished to keep it from you. It remained unseen only until your way of looking became spacious enough to recognize that every moment had been quietly teaching the same pattern from the beginning.
If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Haret library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.